I'd like to call this work session to order if we could. We're on tape. Ernie, could you start identifying yourself and work our way around?
Ernie Hall, Anchorage Assembly. Bill Starr.
Debbie Osiander.
Dick Trainee.
Mike Gutierrez.
Elby Gray Johnson.
Paul Holmes. Chris Birch.
Jerry Weaver, Community Development.
Ross Oxinger, Manager, Engineering Services.
Kurt Burgoyne, Elevator Inspector.
Sharon Ross, Deputy Director, Development Services.
James Gray, Acting Fire Marshal.
Well, thanks for all being here. Last time I heard that there's an S version coming out. You heard that, Jerry? That they're planning on doing an S version. This isn't the document we've got in front of us today. There was some talk about trying to cancel this meeting, but since we've already got it scheduled, we have to go forward with it. Is there an S version coming out?
I haven't seen an S version, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Larry, do you know anything about an S version on Title 23?
I know that the mayor received a group of suggestions, but I haven't, I don't think there's been an S version developed yet. And I know some assembly members have suggestions also that they want to incorporate.
Okay.
So I think the answer would probably be yes, but no document has been prepared.
Okay. Just wanted to check. So Jerry, where do you want to start at?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we had, the work session, the previous work session, there were issues that were brought up. We met with Assembly Member Osiander to go through some of her concerns. She still has some concerns, and I think the majority of you have for proposed amendments. And for the most part, that's all that we have at this point in time. I'm not aware of any other changes that are been proposed out there, so we're ready to discuss, continue discussing the issues with this Osiander.
And we did meet with Mr. Coffey briefly too.
We did briefly meet with Mr. Coffey, and I'm sorry I forgot about that. We did go through some things with Mr. Coffey, and there was no follow-up after
But
that.
he didn't come back with any further questions.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Yeah,
Harriet?
I was going to say, Mr. Coffey mentioned that yesterday. I went to a Title 21 panel discussion that
Right.
Mr. Coffey was part of, and he did mention that he was asked to do something about Title 23. So,
Right, and I was asked by Mr. Coffey that we don't pass this on Tuesday's meeting, but continue public hearing until the meeting of the 29th. Are you up to speed on that, Jerry?
No, sir, I haven't
Okay.
heard that. I just met with him last week, and he didn't convey that to me, but
This was as of 6 o'clock last night. Okay, Debbie, do you want to go over your amendments?
Be happy to.
If you
You should
would.
all have a copy. And some of them, I think, it may be that we could just talk about it and clarify a little more, and they're not needed. These are draft, obviously. I've learned a lot about how the fire code relates to our child care facilities. And at this point, my only lingering concern is Chapter 16 has a provision where we separate child care facilities that care for kids overnight, and they're viewed as needing more protections when they're in that type of situation. And so, the way, as I understand it, and correct me anytime, guys, if I'm misstating something, but as I understand it, the child care facilities are not currently required to be sprinklered, unless they have 49 or more people. Is that right, Russ?
Correct.
Or
Or more than 49, I think.
more than 49, or if they take care for kids at night. Now, Chapter 16 has a provision where a child care home that occasionally cares for kids at night, just for, I think it's less than 30 days, and anyway, there's some flexibility provisions, and I'd like the exemptions for the sprinkler to mirror the exemptions in Chapter 16. So that's my number one item on the amendment there. And we highlighted that exemption at the meeting that we had. Jerry, is there anything else that I didn't maybe need to clarify on that?
no, we, in the response to that, I think we had some wording change that would clarify that had to do with nighttime
Well, if I could speak to that, I think there's a section already in here that allows this, that is coordinated with this 1655-480 nighttime specialized care. And it would be under 2315-310.1.
Hold on, 23,
2315-310.1, it's on page 55 in my version, but my version's probably a little different than yours.
I'm sorry, I'm slow here. 2315 I got, what was the rest?
310.1,
Yeah? Point what?
residential group R.
Okay, got it.
So if you go down to, it says under R3 occupancies, and it says it numerous times. So if you go down to like the third one, it says under R3 occupancies, delete childcare facilities that provide accommodations for 5 or fewer persons of any age for less than 24 hours. We've deleted this statement out of the building code, and then we've replaced it with the statement, childcare facilities providing accommodations for 8 or fewer persons of any age for less than 24 hours, and/or 5 or fewer persons on a 24-hour basis. Childcare facilities shall comply with AMC Chapter 1655, childcare in education facility centers and homes. So what that's done is basically it allows you to do 5 or fewer 24 hours a day without triggering any sort of occupancy classification or a sprinkler system or anything.
Okay, I guess I'm a little bit confused because the 308.1 and the description of the Group E didn't cover that. So you think this would supersede those other two sections?
Yeah, because I guess what's kind of going on here is, what we're doing is we're amending this building code here and trying to bring this building code into what we're doing already in Title 1655. And so we had to amend the building code in 2 places. We had to amend it under Group E occupancies, which are your educational ones, and we also had to amend it under Group R residential occupancies, because these things are kind of like this hybrid that fall in between them, and that's why it's been amended in 2 different places to try and close this loop. If you'll notice under 1655-480, they also restrict to a maximum of 5 children for nighttime care.
But they did allow some nighttime care before you go into this other, the higher regulatory category.
Well, you're not, that 5 or fewer is basically putting you into your single family residential home.
Right.
That's kind of the magic with the 5 or fewer. So what it's kind of saying, as long as you're caring for 5 or fewer on a 24-hour basis, you're nothing more than a single family home. Granted, you're still regulated by, the health department under Title 16. But
Okay,
as far as the building code's concerned, you're not really regulated by the
Okay.
building code.
Ross, would you please look at page 119, 23.45.903.2.3?
119.
What was that again?
119.
Well, what else? There's
23.45.903.2.3, it's called Group E.
I have it.
Okay.
Thank you. If you look at the language there under exception, it specifically says daycare uses licensed to care for more than 5 kids. Oh, that's it, shall be equipped with an automatic.
Yeah, so that's more than
So that's
5.
with,
Less than 5 kids, all right.
all right, is that currently required?
More than 5?
Is this language new?
No.
So currently, we are requiring sprinkling systems even outside on private wells if you've got a child care for more than 5,
More
Night.
than
At
5
night.
nighttime
Overnight.
care.
okay? And we're using the same flexibility, I hope, so you can occasionally have night?
Correct.
Okay, well, that's good. See how, that was a good thing.
Good.
Can I do the second one? Or
Yeah,
you wanna
let
do
me,
it?
Harriet's got a question. Harriet?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, listening to all of this is how are you gonna regulate a family with 5 young kids? You're not sprinkling them, so it sounds like you're taking care of it, so I'm good.
Anybody else on this issue? Debbie?
Assisted living?
Yeah.
Okay, the second one is basically, as I understand it, this code before us now is taking the automatic sprinkler system requirement down to smaller than current. And so I'd like to have it exempt small assisted living facilities, which if you participate in the assembly discussion we had defining assisted living facilities, you can remember we broke it into small ones, which were like in the home that cared for 5 or fewer, and bigger ones. And so I would like to just exempt the smaller ones from the automatic sprinkler requirement.
Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the administration gonna respond to each one of Debbie's amendments? Because I would like to hear what they have to say.
Good question.
Jerry?
Well, we're certainly ready to respond. We have fire here that can speak to the issue. We do have concern about that change, and James can speak to it.
Go ahead, Jerry. You want to respond to her change?
Want me to speak to it?
Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, the building code did a nasty thing to us. They deleted something in there that had similar language for if you're doing like adult care, assisted living facilities. They had this magic 5 or fewer number in there that just kind of threw you right out of the building code. And when we went from 2006 to 2009, they intentionally dropped this language, which kind of forced us to deal with this situation. And so we researched NFPA 101, the life safety code. We researched what the state of Alaska does and everything. And when it came down to it, it comes down to this magic 3-minute evacuation time. And so the current situation is the state of Alaska regulates these facilities. And the requirement is that they have to be, they allow people who aren't capable of self-rescue, self-evacuation. And you could have up to 5 of these people in one house with one attendant, and all 5 of them can be incapable of getting themselves out of the house. And so, but the state says as long as you can show us that you can get everyone out in 3 minutes, we're good with that. And so the state basically requires that you do evacuation drills quarterly. But the kind of the hole in the whole process is the state has no oversight over this. They don't even spot check you to see if you can actually get people out of the house. If you tell the state you can get them out, they're good with that. And so, in other words, they basically allow these homes to self-certify. So we're kind of playing this game where we're pretending things are okay and we're meeting it, but we're not. There's no like real government oversight and verifying that that's what's occurring. And so the code committee is like, let's just get away from this ridiculous 3-minute thing and go with the sprinkler system and be good with it. And I think that it wasn't that big of a stretch for them because, as you know, the IRC was going to require sprinklers in everyone's home anyway. So to require sprinklers just to protect the most vulnerable of our population, it was kind of a no-brainer, common sense thing for them to do, especially given the cost of these systems and the amount of revenue that these homes generate. I mean, we're looking at the cost of the sprinkler system is probably anywhere from a half of a month's revenue to a total month's revenue. And I know there's been some thought too that, well, let's give homes on wells, rural homes, a break. And the flaw in that logic is that if any of these homes actually should have a sprinkler system, it would be those, because the rural homes, for one thing, there's no fire hydrants out the street. The only fire water is the amount of water that shows up on the fire truck. And once that water's gone, it's done. And 2, they're in areas that have longer firefighter response times, generally.
And you wanted to make the case that they're not retroactive. These are new facilities. We have about 400 assisted living facilities within the Anchorage Bowl. There are approximately 20 or so in the outlying rural areas. So predominantly they are in the urban areas.
Yeah, we got 2 in Chugiak, we got 11 in Eagle River, and we got 393 in Anchorage.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Just to share with you, the fire department inspects these, so I'm not sure if everybody knows what these physically look like. We may go into a home that may be 2 or 3 stories, narrow set of steeper stairs, and homes that are allowed to be steeper. My next door neighbor was a very good friend, and she passed away in one of these, but you'll go up a couple of sets of stairs, there'll be a bedroom with a person on a bed, and when we say incapable of self-rescue, a lot of these folks can't even get up out of the bed to use the bathroom. They have to have someone physically pick them up, carry them over, sit them on a toilet. And if we have 5 folks like that in a home, when we go to inspect these homes, we may have one caretaker in the home, it's pretty typical, that is not the homeowner, because the homeowner is off at work during the day. One caretaker who may be incapable of doing a fireman's carry and pulling one person out, much less 5. By the time the fire department gets there, especially in a rural area, in Ms. Osiander's area, those 5 people, I think the chances of saving them are going to be pretty low.
Do you ever require a demonstration to prove that they can actually get that amount of people out the door?
Absolutely. So what the code section does is it says, if you have folks that are incapable of self-rescue, if you're licensed for those folks incapable of self-rescue, you've got to sprinkle. And in the 2009 code, they recognize that we don't want even one person on a pay basis that is incapable of self-rescue in the home without a sprinkler system. So at the local level, and Ross was involved with the adoption, I was not, we said, we can recognize that you could have maybe two parents, elderly parents who are incapable of self-rescue. But once you hit the 3rd person, we think we've hit the threshold where it's too many people for someone to try to drag somebody out of the home before the fire department's there, when the smoke has already overcome all the occupants. And they ought to provide the sprinkler system. It's a business for profit at that point. And that's why I wanted to describe what these physically look like, because I don't know if folks know what these look like. They also put chair lifts in the stairs, is the other piece, Mr. Chairman, and these chair lifts to get people up and down the staircase. I don't know if you've seen these, it folds out. It's a big device that bolts on the side of the stair. Great for getting folks out, but we can't often get a stretcher up past it. So the house is on fire, we're trying to get a stretcher into the house to get a victim and get them out. It adds complexity to it significantly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Osiander, thank you for all of your amendments, frankly, and I respect and appreciate your concerns. But I have to agree with Ross's comments in terms of this being a no-brainer, because I can tell you right now, God forbid, but if I was in one of 5 in an assisted living house and had to have help to go to the restroom, I would certainly be concerned if there was a fire and there wasn't a sprinkler. But my question was, and I think you may have answered it, have you folks ever done any actual spot checks?
On the licensing side, through the chair, we inspect on an annual basis the facilities that are required to be licensed. And if they are not, if they're homes that are not sprinkled and they say they have folks that are capable of self-rescue, we witness their evacuation drills and we time them. And if they don't meet those minimum times, the 3 minutes, and there's some other standards for other thresholds in the code, then we hold them to the higher standard.
And it's my understanding they currently do that at 6 and more, the R4s.
Correct.
But the fire department doesn't do it for the ones that this amendment addresses, the 5 and fewers, the 3, 4, and 5 occupant ones.
Which we will once this is adopted.
And then the number 3 was also picked because that's coordinated with where the state requires the facility be licensed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, okay. So in other words, if there is a facility with 5 folks that are disabled, okay, and you do a spot check, they can get out in 3 minutes, it's all cool, right?
Correct.
But if they can't, then they have to have the sprinkler.
And that typically would happen through the chair at the time that the licensing occurred.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mike and then Debbie.
Thank you. So I understand, Mr. Weaver, I understand you say this only applies to new facilities. If you are currently an assisted living facility, this would not apply to you, right?
That's correct.
Clarify that?
And then,
I don't
no,
think-
I'm sorry, I'm not
I don't
done.
think that's right.
Well, is that right or not?
It's not a retroactive.
What if you redo your license?
If you redo your license and you can't self-rescue, it'd be a requirement.
So it would.
Okay, so when you renew your license, then, but if you're currently operating, until your license is up for renewal, what is the license period?
Well, let me speak to that. The way the code language has been written, it's only triggered when you do a change of use or construct a new assisted living home.
No.
Like if you take an existing single-family home that's functioning as a single-family residence and turn it into an assisted living facility, that's when it's triggered. It's
Okay.
not triggered when you renew your license.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know.
James, do you agree with that?
Correct, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not triggered when you renew your license, it's only if you start up a new facility or start to operate a facility that hadn't been operated before. And I think Ms. Gray Jackson got to the point, and I apologize, I had to step out of the room, but if if all of your residents are capable of self-rescue, this does not apply. Is that accurate? If all of your people can get out on their own,
Correct, sprinklers aren't required.
sprinklers are not required.
Mhm.
If you have one who can't get out on their own, sprinklers would be required.
Correct.
What would happen if you take a new facility, you license it, and all the residents are capable of self-rescue, but as time goes on, someone's condition degrades, and maybe at the time the facility was licensed, they were capable of getting out on their own. A couple of years later, they're not.
We would find that out at an annual inspection or maybe at a licensing renewal inspection. Their status, their actual status as a home would change at that point because they wouldn't be an R3 or an R4. They move into this I2 or whatever the group
Okay.
was for that occupancy.
And would the requirement for the sprinklers then change? Would they then be required to put in a sprinkling system?
If so, that'd be change of use, Ross? Would that classify as change of use?
Well, I think kind of the point we're missing here is that the people that are gonna own and operate these homes, they know what they're gonna do. If they're doing an age-in-place facility, they know that their people are all eventually gonna reach that point where they can't self-rescue. And so, up front, you would do the sprinkler system.
But the code wouldn't necessarily require
It
that.
wouldn't force them to do that, and they could try and play a game with the code, you know.
And people will. I mean, we all know, it's human nature.
Mhm.
So, but at that point, there would be no mechanism to force them to actually, after somebody's condition had degraded to the point where they couldn't self-rescue, there's no mechanism that would say, all right, now you have to put in a sprinkler system.
The mechanism would be is that, all right, your home became an assisted living facility after this code was adopted. And so you could say that at this point now, this code applies to your home. And your people have, degenerated to the point where the sprinkler system is now required. I believe there is a path where you could enforce it if the home comes in under this code or later.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But we have not put anything in the existing building requirements that would trigger a fire sprinkler system. This is just in the,
Would there, that's the part I'm having some issue with. It seems to be sort of an unequal treatment of someone who comes in under this code, who then has someone degrade to the point, and then we're gonna force them to put in a sprinkler system retroactively, but someone who was operating and licensed prior to the institution of this code is not going to be required to put in a sprinkler system.
well, here's another thing too. The state of Alaska's regulations already require you to sprinkle your home if you can't meet the 3-minute evacuation time. Now, the state's not really enforcing that. But that is a fallback for us that say, well, the state regs require it. We'll enforce it for the state.
Right.
Per our deferred jurisdiction letter, we can be no less restrictive than the state of Alaska.
Just to be clear, it makes sense to me that if you have someone who can't get out on their own, that there should be a sprinkler system. But the details are. All right, thank you.
I've got a
Mr.
few
Chairman.
more I'm gonna move on to. Relative to this AO 2011-4, Mr. Baker, can you bring us up to where we're at on a potential rewrite of this?
I think that yesterday we received some additional comments, and Mr. Michaelis has those, but staff has not yet reviewed them. They transmitted them this morning. And after staff reviews, we'll bring those recommendations back to you. And you probably will need another, if you want, you may need another work session because now we've had a complete review of Title 23.
Just the body, what it means for Tuesday night is, we'll open the public hearing, we may end up continuing it until the next meeting so we can get this version in, so. Just want to let you guys know where we're heading with this thing. Debbie, you're next, and then Harriet, and then back to Elby. Debbie?
I wanted to continue on this. I have a lot of personal experience with assisted living because my mother was in it for a long time. And I have visited homes in the Chuyak Eagle River area because I thought for a while I was going to have my grandmother here. So I am very familiar with them, and none of the ones I went to looked like the one James just described. So I think what we need to remember is there's a wide variation in what these things look like and how they're treated. Second thing I want to really emphasize is that this is basically moving into the city, taking over something that the state's currently doing. And I think that we should not move in that direction unless we, number one, see a real paramount reason where the state's falling down on the job. We have funding adequate to do it and staff adequate to do it, and there's a demonstrated problem. At this point, I have not seen that, and so I would really question why it's necessary for us to go further. I think there's some really significant issues in jurisdiction. I've spent a fair amount of time talking to the health department about child care facilities during my tenure in this body. And currently we've got a system where if you go outside of the Anchorage Fire Service area, you've got a different fire marshal. And so we have an instance where for child care homes, the state fire marshal comes in and does the inspections instead of the city fire marshal. So anytime you get a situation where you expand a new law and you don't clearly indicate where the boundaries of that law is, I think there's a significant concern. This is a real expense for folks who want to provide these. And because of my personal experience, I believe that there's a profound need, and it's a growing need, to have more and more of these type of facilities in our neighborhoods close to where we live. I, for instance, specifically looked in the Chugiak area because I didn't want my grandmother to be very far from me, so I could go visit her. There are a lot of neighborhoods that this is going to be a significant cost. I considered an amendment where, if you're on a private well, you don't have to do it, but frankly, that's not fair. That's not really a good way to approach this. We have families now where we have some little kids that maybe can't get out. It's a question of how far does government go to protect everybody? And frankly, there's a balance there. I don't think that we need to have government go into an area unless there's a demonstrated profound need, there's a problem. So I'm strongly of the opinion there's no need to expand our authority in this area, and that we should have an exemption that mirrors a lot of the discussion we had when we were talking about assisted living home. There's a lot more flexibility if you have a small home. You don't have to do all of the infrastructure requirements in terms of parking and landscaping and setback and open space. To me, this is unnecessary and expensive and intrusive and limited. So, anyway, that's all I have to say, I guess.
Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. About a year and a half ago, Assembly members were invited by the Fire Department Employees Association to participate in Fire Operations Training 101. I went, Ms. Elva Gray Jackson was there, Mr. Gutierrez was there, and it precedes your time on the Assembly. I got to participate in, what do you call the rescue? But not throwing over your shoulder, but dragging.
Body drag?
Yeah, we dragged a 150-pound inert dummy under the smoke on the ground. It took me and one other woman a lot of work to get that person to the window where there were a whole bunch of firefighters and other trainees waiting on a ladder. And getting that body, it took about 6 people to get one 150-pound play dead person or disabled person down that ladder. I think perhaps we ought to have a test for these home operators who think that they can get these people out of a smoke-filled operation at which they're making a profit. I don't want to see one person die from this because we did not take a step in the right direction of inspecting these operations and making sure that people will survive a tragedy like a fire. Thank you.
Elby?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Osiander mentioned that it's the state's responsibility. And she's right, and I also heard Ross mention that fact too, but he also said that the state isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, am I correct?
Well, I've had two people talking to me, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm not gonna start over, I'm just kidding. No, anyway, Ms. Oceano mentioned that it's the state responsibility, and I heard you say that, well, yeah, it is their responsibility, but they're not doing their job. Or should they?
Yeah, in my opinion, they're not.
Okay, and so, just a question, all right? Is it time to maybe talk to our legislators to make some changes in state law so that the state will realize the seriousness of this responsibility?
Yeah, that's interesting. I know the state fire marshal's office knows, and they would love to do this. I think they would do this if they thought they had the political clout to make it happen throughout the state of Alaska. Fairbanks did it, but it was easy for them to do it because they had 2 fire deaths. It's easy to do once they
Once
two
somebody
people die,
dies,
yeah. It's like that carbon
And that's a
monoxide.
horrible
Yeah.
way to change the law, because somebody died.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mike and then Paul.
That's not atypical, to not do something until there's a focusing event like that, and then people suddenly care about it, trying to fix the problem. You may or may not be able to answer this, so any one of you who can take a stab at it. We talked about the cost, and you mentioned that the cost is anywhere from half a month to a month's income from the residents of these facilities. I would imagine that somebody operating an assisted living facility carries fairly high insurance costs as well. Just, at least I would expect them to, right? If you were operating that, I think that somebody would want you to carry the insurance. But my question is would they get some sort of insurance break for putting in a sprinkler system?
Yeah, that's a good question. I couldn't answer it. The state of Alaska did say that they do get lower interest loans through AHFC to buy and run these facilities or whatever. So.
And I've been told there are breaks for sprinklers, but I think it depends on the carrier that you're with. I haven't verified it.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Paul and then Debbie.
I just wanted to clarify, so this change is being proposed on page 57, in that automatic sprinkler system shall be provided in accordance with section 903.2.8 of the National Fire Protection Act. That this will apply to all new assisted living facilities regardless of the number of people that they're taking, or is it going to be the 3 and above?
It's specifically 3 to 5 that are incapable of self-rescue.
Yeah, okay, so that'll be the threshold, is 3 or more incapable of self.
Incapable of self-rescue.
And the section actually handles both what we call the R3s and the R4s. The R3 is the 3 to 5 and the R4 is 6 to 16. So.
And I guess just to follow up on, I'm really empathetic with what Ms. Osander is saying, and I understand that part of it, there are differences, particularly when it comes to a well water supplied versus, a water system that can be charged, and there's an extra expense, I'm sure, that comes to that. And I have also went through and worked through the assisted living homes, not only just professionally, but working with folks that I know that are in the business. And there is a concern, of course, on any time you add a cost. So I'm intrigued by the thought that it only applies to new licenses, as we talk about, or changes, if you will. Because for me, life safety is life safety, and it doesn't matter if you're an existing business or if you're trying to start a new one. And if in the intent of, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, where a lot of elderly folks were just kind of left in their homes and everybody ran off and left them alone and abandoned them. And you hear the horror stories of the bus thing and all that. I mean, there's just, we really do need to look out and look after those that are vulnerable in our population, both in childcare and assisted living. And frankly, it is a business. It's more than just a family with a number of, and I do know a lot of folks with large families. So I'm really split on this one. I tend to lean on the life safety, and so I haven't decided just yet, but I'm intrigued by Ms. Osader's comments. Thank you.
Very good, Debbie. Chris, do you have any comments?
No.
Okay, Debbie.
I have 2 points of confusion. My understanding from childcare licensure is each time you renew your license, you have to be current and meet all the requirements. And what I'm hearing you say is that necessarily won't be the case for assisted living, if I'm hearing correctly. Instead, you're going to look at when the original license was offered.
For this specific requirement, through the chair, we inspect when the license is renewed annually on the childcare. That doesn't mean that we apply retroactive standards to them. This specific requirement that we're talking about here for assisted living is for new facilities. So if you had an assisted living facility, it got a license renewal, it was in Anchorage, and I came out to inspect it, I would not look at this section. I would look at the original provisions of your license, and that's the way we would inspect it. This would come about if you came into the building department and got a change of use permit, not for your annual license renewal.
Okay, so basically now, there is no inspection where you guys are going out and looking at small assisted living at all. And now you're going to be doing physical inspections of these, and so there's gonna be some charge associated with that, obviously, because there isn't childcare.
We do above 5 now, we do 6 and above, we do that right now.
Uh-huh.
So what this change will do is push us into 3
No, I
and above.
understand that.
So we do inspect them.
Okay. Part of my concern is to make sure that code is consistent throughout. And the reason I put 5 in the amendment is because elsewhere we define small assisted living homes as is that number. It's been very frustrating that their definitions and terminology aren't the same. I'd be happy to make it 3, but it's ridiculous because elsewhere we define it as 5. Okay, well, I'm still confused about how that's gonna work, but regardless of that, the other point I wanna make is there is a significant difference between a large assisted living home, a senior home center, a senior care facility, and somebody who, because their grandmother's sick, agreed to take 2 more of her friends in and take care of them in their house. I know of nobody who's making money doing that. And I've got a good friend in Seattle who does this business. You barely make it. So to say it's insignificant because a month income will pay for the sprinkler is frankly false. And it's not the same thing as a professional corporation doing it. I'll leave it at that. I think if people have already made up their mind, and there's no point in pursuing that. I'd like facts to be facts.
Mr. Chairman.
That's Mike.
Ms. Osander, I actually know people who are doing it in their homes with a small number of people, and they're making boatloads of money. I'm sorry that you don't know anybody who's doing that, but that doesn't mean nobody
Let's
is.
just leave it.
That doesn't mean no one is.
Let's move on. Mr. Starr, any comments? Mr. Hall, any comments? Okay, well, where we're at now is we've got an S version potentially coming out on this. And then I'm gonna have a work session when we get a final document in front of us that we're gonna be dealing with. Because I want us to know where every dot and period and comma is in legislation we're gonna bring forward to the public. In this version, I wanna see what it looks like. So what I'm gonna do is open the public hearing, continue the public hearing on the 8th. And then by the next meeting, we should have the S version and have another work session on the final document that we're looking at putting into law. Because I don't want any last minute changes coming, an addendum to the agenda that we sit there scrambling around on.
Good.
Yes,
Mr.
Elby?
Chairman, thank you. So we're not gonna go over the rest of Ms. Osander's amendments today?
Well, I want to see what the S version,
Okay.
quite frankly, deals with.
Okay,
Because the S version may have some of these incorporated into it.
all right,
Dick, can I
thank you.
Could I
Go
just
ahead,
very
Debbie.
briefly explain these to see?
Go
I
ahead.
mean, it won't take long.
I would
We've
like
got
to hear,
time.
frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 2.
Well, number 3 is really straightforward. Right now, there's a requirement like that for roads, but this is to say for private driveways. And my suggestion is just drive over my grass, don't make me have a turnaround. That's that one. And number 4, I think could be cleared off with further discussion, but the summary in this document is very, very confusing. And I typed it out as written so you can see what it specifically says in that section. Because the way I read this, it basically says if you're outside of AWU service area, you have to build your water supply system, even for a single-family home, to AWU standards. And I know in the hillside, there's a lot of resistance towards AWU going up further. And in my district and Mr. Starr's district, we have several small utilities that provide water, community water systems. And this is so unclear, I don't know if they're gonna get ability to say yay or nay on my water supply either. So this one needs further clarification, and it may not be an amendment. The fourth one is about fire service, where the priority is for fire trucks. And I had a brief conversation with Mr. Michaelis, and I think the administration is gonna agree with me on this one.
We agree.
Okay, and then number 6, about 4 years ago, Coffee did an ordinance that said that you could live in your travel home while you were building your house. And I looked for it, Jerry, and I could not find it, but I remember it distinctly, so I just put it in there because it needs a little research.
Didn't we put that in the Title 21?
Yeah, it's in the draft of Title
The
21 too.
draft revisions are gonna correlate to this, it'll be the higher square footage. And Ross has talked about,
Wait a minute, Jerry, I was talking about number 6.
on the campers.
What were you talking about?
Campers and jumpers.
Oh, for the land use permit?
Right.
Yeah, no, I was talking about number 6. Coffee did a ordinance that we passed, I thought. That's my memory. Harriet, do you remember it that way?
I'm sorry,
I think so. Maybe it was at least 4 years ago.
I'll have to look. at that.
I could not find it when I went back on my online code version though, so I don't know.
Well, I'll look.
As far as Title 23 is concerned, this is a good catch. This is a land use issue and it shouldn't even be in Title 23. So we were going to propose deleting it in the S version.
Okay, good. So that takes care of 6. But 4 is confusing and 5, I'm glad they agree with me.
Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, Ms. Elder?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so where we're at right now, thank you, Ms. Osander.
Yeah.
Number 5, the administration agrees with. Number 6, you think it needs to be deleted. So how does the administration, what's the administration's opinion on number 3 and number 4? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're opposed to item number 3, and the fire code has some exceptions to increase the 150-foot distance under certain circumstances in the base of the code. And one of those is if you've got an approved automatic sprinkler system in the building already, you can increase it. There are exceptions where because of topography, waterways, non-negotiable grades, or other similar conditions, an approved alternate means of fire protection is provided. So we do have some other exceptions for it. But again, if we have to bring an engine to your property and we've got to come up a road in excess of 150 feet, if we can't turn around, and this has happened in the recent past, the engine's backing back down the road, icy conditions, you get a $100,000 piece of equipment rolling off a road, people potentially injured, equipment damaged. That's why this is in the code. The 150 feet is the hose length, so we can park at the bottom of your driveway, get a hose length up to fight the fire at your house. And if we don't have a turnaround past 150 feet, it's really difficult for us to get all the way up there with one of these large pieces of apparatus and get the thing back out if the fire spreads or if the engine can't turn around. So we'd be opposed to that change.
So just a follow-up. So Ms. Osander, in other words, in driving up on your lawn isn't going to do it.
Well, it would in my lawn. I think it's private property, and if I want to have a long driveway, I do have a driveway that's 150 feet long. I don't want to take a big turnaround out of it for my husband's car and my car. That's just ludicrous. And frankly, I don't even live in the Anchorage Fire Service area, but
Well, you can
according to
move
stuff-
into our area.
I can move. Oh, thank you.
This is our area.
We would
She's
welcome
inviting
you.
Thank you.
She's inviting you in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
She's I heard it as an
All
extension.
comment?
Yeah. So, I'm hearing an existing code, I didn't see it right there, but if, let's say I've got a 200-foot long driveway on Baxter, and instead of having a loop turnaround, I have an area that's cleared and accessible for it, that meets the code?
Yeah,
Meets the code?
Mr. Drummond, through the chair, the code has multiple exceptions for turnarounds.
Okay.
There's some diagrams that show hammerheads and alternate 90-degree. There's plenty of options. The concern I have about parking on the lawn is, I don't know about your driveway, but I throw my snow up and you can't pull into my lawn. My lawn, an engine could definitely not get up there. So I'd be real concerned about 150 or 200-foot driveway, bringing that 80-foot long piece of apparatus up there and then trying to get the darn thing out back down a slippery hill in the winter.
So provided that they meet what's in the existing code, I don't understand.
So I can get sprinklers. That'll be my option.
And this is
Get
not a
ice
change,
rink when you light 'em up.
this is existing code.
Anything else? Okay. With nothing else, this work session's over with. The next one's gonna begin at 12 o'clock. Work session on titles 31 and 32.